The story begins with a radio broadcast saying that Tokyo is plagued by crime, ranging from beatings, kidnappings, to murders. In the midst of these cases, a beautiful woman hires a private detective to look for her missing sister. She had tried to report it to the police, but there was no good response. Therefore, she decided to hire a private detective from a group called City Hunter. Without waiting long, the City Hunter starts investigating the case. Here, we are introduced to a detective named Ryo Seba. Despite his fame as a private detective, he is actually a former Special Forces officer who is very proficient in fisticuffs and war strategy. But after quitting that job, he built the City Hunter group with his friend Hideyuki Makimura. But among all his strengths, Ryo has one very absurd weakness. That is, he can't stand and hold the sight of beautiful and sexy women. Long story short, he finally found the woman's younger sister who was being surrounded by the Yakuza. And without thinking, Ryo immediately showed his extraordinary action. In a matter of seconds, Ryo was able to take down them all. So even though his behavior looks like a masher, he is still serious when he is doing his job. Then he gets acquainted with the woman's younger sister, whose name is Kurumi. Surprisingly, the girl ran away in fear because she thought that Ryo was a pervert and a badass person. Suddenly, Ryo called Makimura to chase him. And when they almost caught Kurumi, suddenly other Yakuza members came to surround them. Inevitably, they both had to be brutalized at that time. Unfortunately, Kurumi escaped again quickly. She even jumped over the building somehow. Ryo told Makimura to chase her by car, while he would jump over the building. But instead of being cool, Ryo ended up falling into a free boarding house. Luckily, he and Makimura managed to find Kurumi's trail and chased her to an alley. There, they both found an oddity, where Kurumi's neck veins turned black. In addition, this girl also became very strong. When Kurumi ran away again, Makimura found a strange liquid that fell out from the girl's pocket. Out of curiosity, he picked it up and hid it. He wouldn't even show it to Ryo until he investigated it himself. Not long after City Hunter's failure, a policewoman came to warn them. This policewoman is Seiko Nogami, a highly skilled investigator who always follows the rules. So it's no wonder that she strongly dislikes City Hunter's methods, especially since Makimura is a former colleague of hers in the police force who left to help Ryo. Before leaving, Seiko and her commander warned City Hunter not to interfere in Kurumi's case again. After returning from the mission, Ryo takes Makimura to a restaurant, as he already has a dinner appointment with his younger sister. On the way, Makimura told Ryo that Kurumi was a cosplayer who often made content on TikTok, and of course all of her content was highly favored by men like Ryo. As a result, Ryo was even more excited to find the girl. Arriving at the restaurant, they are introduced to Makimura's sister, Kori. Here, Makimura wants to tell his sister that she is not his biological sister, because after all, Kori is old enough to know about that fact. But when he wanted to tell her, there was a sudden explosion, which turned out to be a truck that crashed right where they were. From inside the truck came out a driver who immediately beat Makimura for no reason, and strangely enough, he had black veins on his neck, same like Kurumi. Even this truck driver was also very strong and didn't die even though he had been stabbed with a knife. As a result, Makimura had to exert all his strength. Not long after, Ryo came to the restaurant when Makimura had killed the driver. Unfortunately, Makimura had also lost a lot of blood and was unable to walk anymore. He also handed over Kurumi's serum liquid, then hugged Ryo tightly. Before death, Makimura advised his best friend to take care of Kori. A month after his friend's death, Ryo saw a bulletin board at the station. It reads "Excise Kori," which means Kori needs his help to investigate her brother's death. FY City Hunter is a secret agency that can solve all criminal cases. Therefore, Ryo is more of a special agent than a private detective, and if anyone needed his services, they had to write down the code Xyz on the station's bulletin board. However, Ryo decides not to accept Kori's request, so that the girl can take and accept with her loss. At the same time, Seiko is investigating Makimura's death by checking the CCTV at the restaurant. There, she sees the late Makimura handing a serum to Ryo. Seiko suspects that Makimura's killer is connected to other cases of violence in Tokyo. That's because lately there have been a lot of people going crazy and brutalizing for no reason. And according to her, all of that must have something to do with the serum that Ryo now had. Or maybe there is a syndicate that is spreading the zombie virus. On the other hand, Kaori was wandering alone in the Shinjuku area, which is a place full of crime. Then after walking down the street for a while, she met Ryo, who was drunk with two women. Seeing that, Kaori was very angry. Even though Makimura had only been dead for 1 month, but Ryo didn't look sad and instead played around with women. Finally, Kaori decided to investigate the case alone. But unfortunately, she was teased by two middle-aged men who took advantage of the situation at that time. Luckily, Ryo came to rescue her and kept her away from them. Here, seeing that Ryo actually still cares about Kaori. It's just that he can't show his care like a normal person. Afterward, he asked the girl to go home because it was late at night. Instead of obeying Ryo's words, Kaori followed him home. Then, she searched something at the house and hoped to find clues. Unfortunately, Kaori only found perverted videos and Playboy magazines used for reference while Ryo was masturbating. After searching every corner of the house, she finally finds Ryo's secret room and finds a gun there. Ryo enters and says that the gun belongs to Makimura. He then advises Kaori to let go of her brother's death for her own good. On the other hand, Kurumi was seen watching the police who had just found a dead body in the middle of the city, and she seemed to know about the murder. She then returns to her hiding place in the boarding house. Kaori also tries to meet Ryo in the Shinjuku area, and again, she persuades Ryo to investigate his brother's death. But Ryo says that he has changed his profession to become a loincloth dancer at a nightclub. Since Kaori doesn't believe him, Ryo has no choice to prove it by dancing naked. And sure enough, seeing that Kaori was holding back her embarrassment throughout the show. After the dance, Ryo goes into a VIP room there, and Kaori followed him back. Inside the room, there were 3 gangsters who intercepted him, even though Ryo came peacefully. Then while they were arguing, an old mafia stopped them. Not only that, he even ordered his bodyguard to beat up the gangsters. It turns out that this old mafia has great respect for Ryo Seiba. He has even become his informant for certain cases. When they heard Ryo Seiba's name, the gangsters were immediately scared and apologized. They thought that he was just a playboy guy who liked to watch adult Japanese videos. Here, Ryo wants to ask for information about Makimura's death, but before that, the mafia tell Ryo to put on his pants first. In short, this old man said that Makimura's death was related to Kurumi and many other cases in the Tokyo city. That's because over the past 3 months, there have been many young people and homeless kidnapped by a dangerous syndicate. And according to his observations, this syndicate is testing a drug that can make people act like zombies. Interestingly, out of the hundreds of people kidnapped, only Kuruma who could escape and still be able to use her brain normally. After hearing the mafia's explanation, Kaori immediately went out and looked for the girl. By chance, Kaori saw the girl in the Shinjuku area, and without further ado, she immediately persuaded her to speak the truth. But for some reason, Kurumi looked scared and immediately ran away. She then entered a crowded nightclub. But not long after, she was confronted by a man dressed in black suit who suddenly pointed a gun at her. In another corner, the man also had a friend who was on standby to kidnap Kurumi. Not just silent, Ryo, who saw it, immediately acted. Unfortunately, the men could escape without leaving a trace. On the other hand, Kurumi, who was trying to escape, fell and fainted on the side of the road. Spontaneously, Kaori took her to Ryo's house to be treated. When Kurumi woke up, Ryo said that her sister had been looking for her for the past month. But strangely, Kurumi looked confused and said that she didn't have a sister. Hearing that, Ryo was very upset because he had been fooled by a sexy woman, and it looks like the woman is part of the syndicate that kidnapped Kurumi. Then Ryo showed the serum that Makimura found while chasing her. In addition, he also asked Kurumi to tell the truth. So, 3 months ago, Kurumi was looking for her best friend, who mysteriously disappeared. And just as she started to find clues, she was kidnapped by a criminal syndicate. She was then taken to a laboratory and used as a guinea pig for testing their latest serum. Still don't know what the purpose is, but it's clear that they are planning something very evil. Not wanting to involve Ryo and Kaori, Kurumi decides to leave. But Kaori doesn't let her because there are a lot of bad people out there. Elsewhere, two mysterious people were seen who previously wanted to kidnap Kurumi. It turns out that they are members of a criminal syndicate called Union. And one of them is a woman named Sasori, who once claimed to be Kurumi's sister. The two then apologize to the syndicate leader for their failure to catch their target. Here, the syndicate leader has yet to show his face. He then gave his two men another chance to get the target, while killing everyone who got in the way. And if they failed again, then they would be finished off. Not just talking nonsense, he immediately set an example by killing one of his men. Apparently all the syndicate members had chips implanted in their necks, so if they betrayed or failed to carry out the mission, the chip would be detonated by the leader. While the syndicate is carrying out their evil plan, Ryo decides to work with Seiko. From the results of her search, Seiko has the blood test results of the perpetrators they caught, and it turns out that all of them show the same indication, where they have been injected with an excessive dose of liquid. Hearing that, Ryo said that he actually knew about the drug because when he was a child, the drug already existed and was spreading in his neighborhood, and it was often referred to as angel dust. In fact, he was almost killed by someone who used the drug. According to him, angel dust is a very dangerous drug. That's because it can be misused to turn ordinary people into murder weapons who are capable of killing a battalion of soldiers. Meanwhile, Seiko also discovered a surprising fact that Kaori's father was one of the victims of angel dust exactly at 20 years ago. When Kaori's father went on a rampage, there was a policeman who shot him, and it turned out that the policeman was Mekimura's father. After that incident, he decided to adopt Kaori. Then, when Mekimura became a policeman, his father advised his eldest son to investigate angel dust secretly. So, all this time, Mekimura already knew about the Union Syndicate. Hearing Seiko's explanation, Ryo becomes overthinking, because it seems that the Syndicate members deliberately killed Mekimura because he knew their secrets. But when he back home, Ryo's mood immediately changed to happy when he saw Kuruma, who was cosplaying as a kawaii cat character. Apparently Kurumi has been invited by a company that will hold a national cosplay event, but Ryo immediately forbade her to go, so as not to be kidnapped again by the Syndicate mafia. But Kurumi still wanted to go, because the event was a paradise for cosplayers where she's passionate. On the other hand, Kaori persuades Ryo to protect Kurumi at the festival. She even shows him a photo of a beautiful woman who is the CEO of the company holding the festival. And as expected, Ryo was persuaded easily because his weakness is beautiful women. Long story short, the three of them went to a cosplay festival. There Kaori and Kurumi focused on their looks, while Ryo was busy watching the women, which made him crazy happily. Later, Ryo and Kaori were on standby to protect Kurumi. Meanwhile, the Union Syndicate boss's men were also there, and one of them had aimed at Kurumi with a tranquilizer gun. Then, when everyone was focused on the show, they started to act. Luckily, Ryo could save her with his pony jumping move, but when he wanted to take Kurumi away, Ryo was intercepted by the Union Syndicate boss's other men. And to make matters worse, he was also attacked with Sasori's death blow. At the same time, Kaori took Kurumi to a safe place. Unfortunately, there was a police commander named Akitaka Ito, who had just arrived. Finally, Kaori also entrusted the girl to the police, while she would help Ryo in the fistfight. However, Kaori doesn't realize that the Union Syndicate boss's men are already aiming at her from the top of the building. Seeing that, Ryo didn't just stunning. Suddenly, the Weebu and visitors were amazed by his rescue action. They seemed to think that the struggle and action was part of the show. They even cheered when Ryo was beating up the brutal woman. After defeating the Union Syndicate's forces, Ryo calls Seiko to take Sasori to the police station. But on the way, the chip around her neck goes off and suddenly explodes in the car. And on the other hand, the police commander didn't secure Kurumi. Instead, he kept her in a warehouse and handed her over to the Union Syndicate boss's men for hundreds of thousands of dollars. It turns out that the Japanese police commander is evil, and apparently the Union Syndicate boss had planted a bomb in his suitcase. After that, the commander death by explode. Then the Syndicate troops took Kurumin and left the corpse of the corrupt police commander. Meanwhile, Ryo has just treated the wound on his hand from the Union Syndicate boss's men attack. At the same time, Seiko contacted him and informed him about the death of the Union Syndicate boss's men. According to him, the Union Syndicate is really strict in keeping their secrets, so if a member is caught, then they will immediately execute him. Ryo looked stuck and didn't know what to do. Then, while he was daydreaming on the roof of the building, Kaori came to apologize. It was because of her that the situation became chaotic. If she hadn't let Kurumi come to the festival, everything would have been fine. Crying, Kaori begged Ryo to continue investigating the case for the sake of the late Mekimura. At first, Ryo told her not to interfere anymore, but it seems like this girl really means it. Finally, he invited Kaori to take revenge together. On the other hand, Kurumi woke up in the laboratory belonging to the Union Syndicate. There she saw her friend who was kidnapped the other day by the Union Syndicate boss's men. In addition, she was also surprised by the CEO's women who held a festival event. That's because it turns out that she is not the real CEO, but a scientist working with the Union Syndicate named Seira Tsukino. The woman then went to the Union Syndicate boss to show the latest results of the Angel Dust liquid, which had more power twice time of the product 20 years ago. But instead of praising her performance, the Union Syndicate boss finishes her off. We finally get to see the face of the Syndicate leader. He is a mafia whose real name is Kunio Kono, who is very powerful in the Tokyo city. But until now, no one has ever known about the Union Syndicate, even though it is very influential in the Japanese criminal world. After killing the female scientist, he ordered his men to finish off all the employees there. The Union Syndicate boss then saw Kuruma, who still looked shocked, and the plan: he will bring this girl to the Union headquarters for further research. Meanwhile, Seiko and the other cops discover the body of their commander. And of course, Seiko is very disappointed after finding out that her superiors took bribes from the Union. Without thinking, Seiko orders her subordinates to search the commander's room and find as many clues as possible. At the same time, Ryo and Kaori were looking for Kurumi. They were very suspicious that the girl had been kidnapped by the Union again. Luckily, Ryo had slipped a tracking device in Kurumi's earring, so there was no need to bother investigating her location. On the way, he contacted an old mafia, who named Akatsu, to ask for info about the Union Syndicate, or often referred as Union TOP. According to the old mafia's information, the syndicate has its headquarters in Central America, and has branches in many countries, including Japan. Long story short, Ryo and Kaori arrive at a war-torn tunnel, but strangely there is no one in the place. After walking down the tunnel, they saw a building that was none other than the Union's laboratory, and they were surprised because everyone there was dead. Unfortunately, they didn't find Kurumi there, and Ryo didn't smell the scent of life either, and there are only angel dust liquids. Then, without realizing it, the Union Syndicate boss's troops had surrounded them. Not wanting to look panicked, Ryo pretended to be a food delivery driver ordered by the Union Syndicate boss. But unfortunately, the mafia didn't believe his bad acting. As a result, he ran away and escaped. Ryo then hid behind the wall and waited for the troops to approach. Then, with great agility, he immediately unleashed his true power. While Ryo took out the Union Syndicate boss's troops, Kaori helped as much as she could so as not to be considered a burden on the team. And because of this cooperation, they were able to overwhelm the troops. When they managed to slaughter the entire mafia army, the Union Syndicate boss appeared while pointing a gun at Kurumi. He then praised Ryo's abilities, which were indeed extraordinary. He even offered him to join the Union Syndicate. But as a person of integrity and doesn't like having a psychopathic boss, Ryo immediately rejected the offer without thinking. As a result, the Union Syndicate boss was angry and mobilized one of his men who had been drowned in angel dust. In addition, he has also been injected with the blood of Kurumi, who is the best experimental rat in the Union laboratory. Like it or not, Ryo must fight the mafia monster. At the same time, Kaori secretly followed the boss who dragged Kurumi upstairs. And unexpectedly, it turns out that the tunnel is directly connected to the Union Syndicate building in downtown Tokyo. Here, the Union Syndicate boss told her to leave and not interfere, but Kaori kept trying to break the glass barrier in the building. Annoyed by the sight of her, the Union Syndicate boss finally reveals the biggest secret, that Kaori is an adopted child. And not only that, he also told her that her biological father was a lab rat from the Angel Dust Project. Then one day he was killed by a policeman who was none other than Makimura's father. So all this time she was raised by his own father's murderer. Hearing that, Kaori was hysterical and really wanted to beat the face of the Union Syndicate boss. But unfortunately, it was blocked by a very thick glass. Fortunately, the hero came at the right time. After bringing the Union Syndicate boss to his knees, Ryo allowed Kaori to take revenge with her own hands. The girl then took out Makimura's gun and deployed it at the Union Syndicate boss's forehead. But unfortunately, she couldn't pull the trigger at all, not wanting to be the killer. As a Ganful man, Ryo calms Kaori down and says that the Union Syndicate boss will definitely get his karma. And not long after that, the mafia boss was suddenly visited by the Central Union helicopter. At first he thought that they were going to pick him up. But it turns out that a chip was planted in the neck of Kunio Kono, or the boss of the Union Syndicate, and then exploded. When the Union Syndicate boss is dead, the helicopter leaves. Then not long after, Seiko arrived with the police and medical team to secure Kaori and Kuruma. 1 month passed quickly, and the police had closed the Union case as the Union Syndicate boss was dead. On the other hand, Kaori visits her brother's grave and prays for him. Meanwhile, Kuruma has regained her health and started to pursue cosplay again. Even her followers have doubled because her story went viral on social media. She also got more gifts, donations, and endorsements that made her live as a content creator. At the end of the movie, Kaori decides to stay with Ryo and offers herself as his new partner. And if Ryo dares to reject her, then she will not hesitate to throw away all his porn video collection. Then the movie ended.